right to have the camera?
I'm not giving you permission to take my photos.
Okay. Are you a public servant or? Okay. This is my city, and so I have a right to film.
This is United Nations compound?
A United Nations compound?
Yes.
This is a compound?
Yeah. Since Sunday evening, we took over this compound. This is international territory. When you step outside, it's US. Here is international territory. This is UN compound.
The United Nations claims to be the champion of your human rights. Here they are boasting about how they love the freedom of the press. But notice that in the UN Declaration of Human Rights, they claim the power to deny you any of your rights at their discretion if it doesn't fit their agenda. There were thousands of cameras filming the United Nations that day. Activists, journalists, and citizens. But as soon as their security saw that one activist was speaking against the UN's agenda, she was targeted, just like the UN's Declaration on Human Rights says that they have a loophole for. Let's recap what you just saw. The UN set up a compound in the middle of Salt Lake City. The UN says they took over the building. The UN stated that the taxpayer-funded Salt Lake Palace was now international territory where U.S. rights don't apply. The UN stated that the United States was outside the doors of the Salt Palace. And the UN, who at best should have been a guest in Salt Lake, instead acted like an invader and denied a U.S. citizen their First Amendment rights. Should the United Nations be allowed to simply claim territory in the middle of the United States and deny any U.S. citizen any of their inalienable rights? The evidence is clear that the United Nations claims of defending human rights is a complete farce. They have demonstrated their intent to rule, along with their complete lack of respect for our own citizens, for all to see, right here on our own soil. That's not all, but this has all been brought to you by your fellow elected leaders and other prominent Utah officials. The Utah legislature actually paid for them to come here and defended this international compound with your tax dollars. The mayor of Salt Lake City welcomed them with open arms, and the executives of Utah Valley University invited them here shortly after they officially signed up to promote the UN's agenda through the university. Do you know that the United Nations is already writing and passing laws that the state of Utah and Utah's cities are putting into law on behalf of the UN? We're upset that the Utah legislature and the city of Salt Lake invited this organization to come and trample on your rights. Please go right now to UnitedNationsUtah.com and sign the petition, and then share this video on all your social media. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more bombshell reports about the United Nations in Utah and what you can do to take back your local government. I'm Ben McClintock from defendingatutah.org. I wanted to take this special time. We've been talking about a lot on the radio regarding the UN coming to Utah on August 26th, 27th, and 28th of this month, right here in August. And so I want to go through and show you just some basic principles about the UN and about their upcoming visit to Utah, and then some things that we can possibly do about it. The UN, again, like I said, is coming to Utah. They're having most of their presentations and their events that they're doing at the Salt Palace on August 26th, 27th, and 28th. And this is really focused towards the youth and trying to get them propagandized into Agenda 2030, as well as the anti-family agenda of the United Nations. So what is the history of the United Nations? I want to give you some background of the principles that the United Nations is based upon, and then we can really start to move forward and understand why it's such a danger today and why it's a problem. So to be able to do that, we've got to get some basic foundations of what is America founded upon. Our country is founded upon the principles in the Declaration of Independence that we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. We have God-given rights, and that among these, of course, are life, liberty, and happiness, and that to secure or to protect those rights, governments are instituted among men, okay? So the United States is based upon the foundation, the principle that we have God-given rights and that government is just there to protect those rights. Where the UN is founded upon a completely different fundamental principle. Their belief is that rights and freedoms, and this is according to their own UN Declaration of Human Rights, that rights and freedoms may in no case be exercised contrary to the purposes and principles of the United Nations. Okay, that's a huge difference, that they believe that you do not have any rights that might go contrary to their purposes. You have zero rights unless they give them to you, whereas America's foundation is the complete opposite of that. And this has been very problematic since its inception. So now the UN has been talked about as being the last best hope for peace. J. Irvin Clark explained that the UN Charter is built to prepare for war, not to promote peace. The Charter is a war document, not a peace document. It says not only does the Charter organization not prevent future wars, but it makes it practically certain that we shall have future wars. And as to such wars, it takes from us the power to declare them, to choose the side on which we shall fight, to determine what forces and military equipment we shall use in the war, and to control and command our sons who do the fighting. And so the United Nations has been since its inception, its papers, its own founding documents make it a war document. It's a war organization under the Orwellian premise of stopping war. And this has borne out in matter of fact, actually, because not a single war since the beginning of the United Nations has been a constitutional war. All of the wars we've been in, Korea, Vietnam, Gulf War, Afghanistan, Iraq, every single one has been based on a UN declaration, not a congressional declaration. And so it is a direct assault on our Constitution, as well as our nation's right and ability to self-determination. And G. Edward Griffin, he wrote the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, and he did several videos about the United Nations. I want to share with you a short clip from a video that he produced on the United Nations.
In 1960, in Africa, the Belgian Congo received its independence and established its own government in what later became known as Zaire. The new leadership immediately aligned itself with Moscow and began a campaign of terrorism and destruction in order to eradicate all traces of opposition to itself. When the nation plunged into chaos, one of its provinces, called Katanga, decided it wanted no part of the Red Revolution. It declared its independence and offered to align itself with the West. The will of the people was expressed in the words of their leader, Moise Chambé, who declared to the world, "We are seceding from chaos." Katanga remained a sea of calm amid the bloodshed and violence around it, and by this contrast it became a thorn in the side of the central Congolese government, which now wanted to pull it back under its control. The Red regime was not militarily strong enough to accomplish that by itself, so it asked the United Nations to do it for them. The excuse they gave was that they wanted the UN to put down rebellion and to restore law and order in the Congo. The UN sent most of its military forces not to the central Congo, where thousands of people were being massacred and where law and order were very much needed to be restored, but to Katanga, where they were not needed and definitely were not wanted. The UN declared it was contrary to its own charter to intervene in the internal affairs of the Congo, and that it had no intention of doing so. But it was clear from the outset that this was not the truth. As some of the UN personnel even admitted later in their public speeches and books, the real purpose of the UN was to intervene in the Congo's internal affairs and to force an independent, anti-communist state back under the rule of a communist puppet regime.
Okay, so that the United Nations has never been about peace, has never been about protecting anybody. It is about enforcing and building world government. We have the founding people in the United States that were actually a part of writing the charter and helping to build the charter, men like Alger Hiss or convicted Soviet spies, and working with the Soviet Union to make sure that it was actually building a tyrannical world government. In fact, President Benson, he says that we should get out of the United Nations and get the United Nations out of the United States. And that's out of his chapter in the book, The Naked Cap, I'm sorry, not the Naked Capitalists, The Enemy Have Done This, called The United Nations Planned Tyranny. The United Nations is designed to be a tyrannical organization. And this is continuing this day. We go to 2015, the UN subverting free people. They are supporting totalitarian regimes where the UN troops are involved in the slaughter of civilian protesters. They actually killed people because they were involved in actually, standing up for their rights. And then we have right here in Utah in 2018, Utah Valley University announced that they were going to join officially the UNDPI, which is the United Nations Department of Public Information. And what you have to do to sign up for this is that you are seeking to promote the agenda of the United Nations. Their role is to raise public awareness and support of the work of the United Nations through strategic communication campaigns, media, and relationships with civil society groups. And so now we have Utah Valley University officially signing up to promote the United Nations anti-liberty, pro-world government, world tyranny agenda. And in fact, when we brought this information to one of the vice presidents of Utah Valley University, he said, well, we have to give every side a point of view. Well, this is clearly false. They are not interested in giving every side a platform to have their point of view heard. No, their job is to make the public aware and to promote the United Nations agenda. And so ever since they joined this last year, they have been pushing to bring the United Nations to Utah. And so in 2015, the UNDPI, who this organization that the UVU just signed up to be a part of, they are seeking prison sentences for reporters because they simply did a report on the United Nations incompetence, putting somebody in jail simply for reporting incompetence, totally the antithesis to our idea of freedom of the press, the government being held accountable by people reporting on their actions. No, but the United Nations cannot handle that because you have no rights that go contrary to their purposes. In the next year, 2016, Matthew Lee was actually accused of exposing corruptions, as if that was like a crime, is to expose corruption. And so they take away his press credentials simply because he was exposing United Nations corruption. The United Nations, of course, we have here Jackie Biskipsky on the Utah Valley University's website announcing that the UN is coming to Salt Lake City in August of this year. And as a